Have you ever seen a human doll? This is the heartbreaking story of Annabelle, a poor, innocent child who was ripped away from her blind mother to live in a mansion, not as a guest, not as a child, but as a living doll. What happened to her inside those walls will leave you in tears. So sit back, relax, and let's delve into the story. Once upon a time, there lived a very wealthy woman. Everyone called her Madame Gold. Madame Gold was a very ruthless businesswoman who was known for her ruthless heart and fierce ambition. She had built an empire from the scratch, but in her quest for power, she neglected one thing that needs her the most: her only daughter, Princess Chloe. Princess was just 10. She was just 10 years old, but already ruled the mansion. Her every demand was granted without questioning. She had a collection of dolls that she purchased from every country she visited. One fateful day, Princess burnt all her dolls and requested for something strange. "Mother, I want a living doll, one that can cry, eat, talk, and laugh." Her mother swung into action immediately. She went to the black market of the poor. There, she was told of a beautiful black girl with a delicate skin, Annabelle, who lived with her blind mother in the slum. Just the kind of living doll her princess wanted. Madame Gold sent her bodyguards to the slum. They ripped Annabelle from her mother without mercy. Her blind mother stood there helpless as she cried, pleading with the men not to take her daughter. But it was already too late. They threw some bundles of money at her and took her daughter to the van. Her daughter Annabelle was only 5 years old. She was her mother's eyes, the only family she ever had, and the reason for her still being alive. That fateful day, she scolded Annabelle for going to Mama Iya's house to beg for food. She did not like how Mama Iya made Annabelle do strenuous work before giving her food. She loved Annabelle so much and couldn't stand her going through so much stress, not knowing that something more dangerous is about to happen. Now she sat down there, regretting not allowing her go to Mama Iya's house that day to beg for food. Anything at this moment was better than the pain she felt right now, knowing that her daughter has been taken away from her forever. Annabelle sat quietly in the van, terrified. She didn't know who the men were and why they separated her from her mother, nor where they were taking her to. But she knew that her mother didn't want her to go, so she was not happy. She wanted her mother, and she begged the men to take her back to her mother, but they ignored her and acted as though she was not there. They drove for a long while. Annabelle had no idea she was going to be a living doll meant to cure the boredom of a spoiled rich child. They arrived the mansion hours later, and Annabelle couldn't believe her eyes. The mansion was bigger than anything she had ever seen. The walls looked like polished glass, with gates that looked like they could swallow an entire church. The place was beautiful, but Annabelle does not want to be there. She prefers her little space with her mother, even if they could barely feed. In that moment, Annabelle craved the warmth of her mother, but no one cared what she wanted. The guards dragged her through the giant doors as if she was a forgotten bag of onion. Inside the mansion, everything sparkled. The floors, the ceiling, even the air smelled like money. But none of it mattered. The chandelier above her head was too large. Annabelle feared it could fall against her. The maids were not friendly. Everywhere was cold and empty. And then she saw her, the little queen of the house, her new owner, Princess Chloe. She was only 10 years old, but her heart was hard like granite. She was dressed like royalty. Shiny dress, layered belt, and a look in her eyes that made Annabel's skin crawl. She stared at Annabel and said, "You are smaller than I thought. Perfect, just perfect. Come with me." That day, Annabel's life as a free child ended. She was stripped like a yam, bathed with cold rose-scented water, and dressed in clothes too stiff for a living child. They forced ribbons on her hair, painted powder on her cheek, and told her not to speak unless spoken to. "You are a doll now," Princess said, reminding her that dolls don't speak. Princess placed her at the corner of the room and left her there for hours like a statue. Her legs shook, her stomach growled, and Princess warned the maids never to give her food. "Do not feed her like a human, or else she would grow," she said to the maid, who looked down on Annabel in pity, knowing the misery she was about to face. That night, Annabel stood there, watching Princess devour her dinner without giving her some to eat. Annabel stood there not because she was comfortable, but because she was scared. Scared of the strange faces, scared of the 10-year-old that was giving her orders. Annabel stood there, terrified to cry, because Princess warned her that if she cried, she would be locked away in the wardrobe. And that was how Annabel's nightmare began. She was only given 2 slices of bread to eat daily, just enough to keep her breathing. Every night, Annabel was made to sit inside the dusty wardrobe, seated, not on a bed or a mat. She would coil herself up, whispering her mother's name, calling her to come and help her as she prayed and cried herself to sleep. Meanwhile, back home, Annabel's mom sat and cried herself to stupor. She prayed and hoped that the nightmare would end. Every morning, she would sit around the door, hoping that Annabel would return. Her neighbors tried to calm her down, but none of them knew where Annabel was taken to. The bundles of money the guards threw at her was laid on the table. She refused to touch it, as she believed it's blood money. In the mansion, Annabel was dressed like a doll and forced to smile. She was forced to stand still, as Princess screamed out angrily whenever she tried to move her body. Madame Gold, her mother, did not care that Annabel was someone else's child. To her, Annabel was a solution to Princess Chloe's tantrum, a distraction, a breathing toy to pacify her spoiled child, a child she left in the care of maids since she was born, a child she had no control over. Madame Gold controlled men and businesses, but had no control of her own daughter. If one did not know Madame Gold better, they would say she was even afraid of her own daughter, a 10-year-old child. A child who threw hot tea at a maid for failing to tie her bow perfectly. The maid was fired instantly, her belongings tossed away in the gutter. Madame Gold never questions her daughter. Instead, she would sigh and say that she was just a child, but she was growing into something cold and cruel, and poor Annabel became a victim of that transformation. Desperate to survive, Annabel, on one fateful morning, when Princess left her on the corner, snuck out of the room and made her way to the kitchen, where she saw a bread made for the maids. Her hands trembled as she reached for the leftover bread. The scent filled her nose. She hadn't eaten anything meaningful in days. Just as she lifted the bread to her mouth, a loud shout echoed from behind like a wind. Annabel, what do you think you are doing? Annabel quickly dropped the bread on the floor. Standing by her was the chief maid, Mrs. UCHE, a tall, stern woman who made even the other staff shiver. She took the bread and tossed it into the bin. It seems you don't know your place in this house. But I'm hungry, Annabel cried. But Mrs. UCHE looked at her with eyes that sent shivers down her spine. We are all hungry here, but some of us know how to control our appetite and stick to the rules. She grabbed Annabel by the hands and dragged her down the hallway like a disobedient puppy. You are only here to entertain Princess, so do just that. Just as they were passing, they met Chuka, the new driver, who was recently employed. He had never seen Annabel before. He asked around and was told that Annabel was Princess's life doll. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't sleep all night. He kept remembering the incident. The next day, he brought food, hoping to pump into her, but never saw Annabel again in the mansion. He decided to go to the police and make a report. The police found it hard to believe. Some laughed at him, others told him to get a proof. But Chuka doesn't have any proof. All he had was a memory of that day, how the little girl was dragged down the hallway. Chuka returned to the mansion, determined to gather proof and present to the police. That evening, he had his phone under his uniform. As he passed the hallway, he heard a little noise. From Princess's room, he heard a little whimper, like the sound of a dying bird. He stopped and peeped. What he saw gave him a shocker in a way that he could not explain. Annabel was kneeling down in her stiff doll dress, her tiny hands wrapped around her arms. She looked up at Princess, who laughed cruelly, some crumbs at her like she was feeding some stray dog. He took the first picture, and before he could even take the second one, a cold voice pierced the air like some wind. What do you think you are doing? His blood ran cold. It was Madame Gold, who was standing right behind him with his guards. Chuka turned quickly, trying to hide the phone behind him, but it was already too late. Give me that, he ordered, as Chuka hesitated, pleading with her to release the girl. She's not a doll, madam. She's an innocent girl, he said to Madame Gold, who landed a hot slap on his face. How dare you tell me what to do? He collected the phone, raised his hand, and smashed it into pieces before his eyes. She ordered the guards to lock Chuka up in a place where he would never be found. The guards did not ask questions. They grabbed Chuka and took him away. Chuka pleaded with Madame Gold, but he paid deaf ears to him. Chuka was thrown into an old storage room and locked up there. The room had no windows, no mattress, and no chair. He was fed with crumb. Poor Annabel bore the brunt of everything. She was made to crawl around the room like a pet. Hours passed into days, and days into weeks. Annabel's little body began to shrink. Her skin pierced, and her eyes lost its shine. Her voice vanished entirely, and she became exactly what the princess wanted, a quiet, obedient life doll. No one ever visited her. Her birthday passed unnoticed. Her tears dried up, and her hopes dashed away into the winds. She longed for the blind embrace of her mother, her warm embrace, but instead, all she got was Princess's cruel words, reminding her that dolls don't cry nor eat. She was never allowed out of the mansion and was locked up when visitors came into the mansion. Even the maids dare not speak to her, as they feared what the princess would do if she ever found out. Then one morning, everything shattered. Annabel's body could not hold on anymore. Her legs couldn't stand, and she collapsed to the floor unconscious. Her head hit the floor and blood gushed out. But even then, Princess did not cry out in pity or concern. She let out a loud shout. "My doll has broken!" She ordered the maids to fix it. But what she didn't know was that Annabel was dying. For years, Annabel was suffering from an underlying ailment that even her blind mother knew nothing about, a condition that weakens her immune system and causes her to get weak. And the only known remedy was a surgery that requires a spleen donation from her direct biological parents. Madame Gold called their private doctor to the mansion, who discovered that Annabel was at the verge of death and needs urgent medical attention. He suggested transferring her to the hospital for proper medical care, but Madame Gold resisted the idea, with her hands on her hips and panic in her voice. "No hospital," she said to the doctor, who insisted that if she is not treated within 48 hours, she would give up the ghost. Madame Gold dismissed the doctor. That night, Madame Gold ordered two of her men to drive Annabel down the bush path. The guards laid Annabel on the cold earth, her skin cold and looked lifeless. One of the guards said to Madame Gold, "This girl won't survive this, so." Madame Gold rolled her eyes quickly and said to the guards, "Then let her die quickly. Who cares?" They got back into the van and drove away, leaving Annabel alone in the bush. They got back into the mansion to her angry daughter Princess, who was so furious. "Where is she? Where is my doll?" Tossing pillows and ornaments around the room. One of the maids tried to calm her. She charged at the maid with a knife, and unluckily for her, she tripped by the rug and fell to the ground. The knife pierced into her stomach. She was rushed to the hospital, but Princess could not make it. As Madame Gold sat there at the hospital, weeping, the police came in and arrested her. Annabel was found by a journalist who trailed Madame Gold that night. The journalist got a gist from someone who told her what was happening in the mansion. Madame Gold wondered who could have relayed it to the press. Only one person came to her heart: the doctor who examined Annabel earlier that day. But little did she know that it was Mrs. UCHE, her chief maid, who rebuked Annabel for taking food in the kitchen. Mrs. UCHE desperately wanted to help, but with the cameras mounted everywhere, she couldn't have Madame Gold finding out what she has in mind. Her heart bled every time she yelled at Annabel. She told her cousin, who was a journalist, and told her everything that happened. When she found out that Madame Gold wanted to dump Annabel in the bush, she alerted her cousin, who followed Madame Gold and captured everything. This was enough evidence for the police, who quickly arrested her for all she did. The news broke in all the nation's social media. Pictures of Annabel lying down in the bush, her tattered doll dress, and her mother sitting in the hospital bed flooded the internet. The nation stood still for a while. People cried, people reached out, and for the first time in a while, people truly cared. Even the president himself was moved to tear up when he watched a short documentary about Annabel in the evening news. He ordered a full investigation into the case. Annabel was moved to a specialist hospital, and a quick emergency was immediately given to her by the specialists. After several diagnoses, they discovered that Annabel's case is curable with a surgery that demanded a genetic spleen infusion. a surgery that is very expensive, but the president ordered the specialist to go on with the surgery. Annabel was moved to an international medical facility. The surgery was delicate, took hours, and was successful. Just when everyone thought the miracle was complete, Annabel's blind mother was examined by the medical specialists. They discovered that her blindness was curable. Her cornea was damaged by an untreated infection years back and can be corrected by surgery. Annabel's mother was so happy. So I will see my daughter with my eyes again. Weeks later, the surgery was carried out and it was a success. When the bandage was finally removed, they both embraced each other, crying tears of joy. The president did not stop there. He gave them a beautiful 3-bedroom bungalow in the city, a car, and a caretaker. He gave Annabel a full scholarship in a prestigious private school in the nation, only attended by the rich. He made Annabel a symbol of child rights in the nation. He launched a national campaign in her name, themed "Let Children Be Children." The nation rejoiced. But as Annabel's life blossomed, Madame Gold's life crumbled. She was arrested and prosecuted. The video evidence and Mrs. Orji's testimony against her all stands as a mountain of shame to her, and the worst of all, she lost her daughter, Princess Chloe, whose death shocked even her enemies. In court, Madame Gold stood in silence, her designer cap shocked and soaked in tears. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in prison with no parole. Her once powerful empire fell apart. Her board members resigned, and her name that once was spoken in reverence became a joke in public spaces. Madame Gold sat in prison every day, staring at the wall, whispering, "If only I had trained my daughter better. If only I had given her motherly attention and advice. If only I had corrected her." But if only was too late. Annabel, on the other hand, became a symbol of resilience. Her story was turned into books, documentaries, and even school plays. Years later, she stood tall on the university graduation stage, now a lawyer, with her mother sitting proudly beside her. She gave her speech with tears in her eyes. "I was once a doll," she said, "but today I'm no longer anyone's toy. I'm a girl, I'm a human, and I survived." And the hall rose in a standing ovation. That was how Annabel, the girl used as a doll, became the voice of every child who was ever oppressed, the hope of every mother who has ever lost a child to the cruelty of the world, and the hope of every soul that was once broken. From that day on, Annabel's law was passed, the law that makes it a criminal offense for any child to be employed, sold, trafficked, or used as a domestic help. A law that gave children identity and dignity. The lesson to be learned here is that children are not toys, nor are they extensions of their parents' pride or wealth. They have soul, they have needs and emotions and rights. The story of Annabel reminds us that indulgence without correction is not love, but destruction in disguise. Madame Gold gave her daughter everything except discipline, and in doing so, she raised a daughter who became cruel and inhuman, and that led to her destruction that wealth couldn't undo. It also teaches that no amount of wealth can save a parent from the consequences of raising a child without values. Madame Gold controlled empires, but failed to raise one child with kindness and empathy. And in the end, she lost both her child, her empire, and dignity. It also shows how the poor are treated with cruelty and laxity, how the society allows evil to thrive, The story also shows that just one action of kindness, like Chuka and Mrs. Orji, can begin a movement of change. Lastly, this story reminds us that children deserve protection, love, and care, no matter their parents' class, rich or poor. I hope Annabelle's story taught you a lesson. This is Ifijide's Folktales. Thank you for listening. Do share this video, give this video a big thumbs up, and subscribe to this channel.